we are gaveling in officially in room 305 for our special advisory board on boards and commissions, and I will turn it over to Assistant City Manager Evan Raleigh.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the committee. So, committee's covered a lot of ground, and we have a packed agenda today. So, just to kind of give you a quick preview of what you can expect to hear from Ms. Mosley, who I'll pass the mic over to in just a moment. So at the last meeting, we left where we left it was bringing back to you some possibilities for you to consider around alignment, the potential merger of various boards and commissions. So we will present those options to you. And should you choose to take action to bring some of those groups together, we also have a presentation related to the process and the structure around how that could be accomplished. So without further ado, I will recognize Ms. Mosley to kick us off.
Well, and before you do, just I don't think this mic is on.
The mayor's
Is
mic's
it?
not working.
We don't have reinforcement in here.
Okay.
It's just
All right.
the mic
Just
is
for
just for the broadcast.
Okay, but I'm just saying the light's not on. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Gotta check that date.
Please, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council. Taisha Mosley with the Community Engagement Office. I will say it is odd to sit and present to you, but I will be turning which direction to make sure that we are making eye contact. So we're going to, as Mr. Raleigh stated, we're going to cover a lot of topics today. There will be moments throughout the presentation for us to pause and have discussion throughout. So you don't have to retain everything that I'm sharing until the end. Yes,
I was just going to say, this is extremely awkward for y'all. I mean, like, you're going to need vertebrae adjustment. So, I mean, if you guys need to turn or whatever, we will not take offense if you change your chairs around.
Okay. Also a good point. Today's agenda, we'll talk about alignment. We'll go into process and logistics. We have several follow-up items, both from the last two meetings, council retreat, conversations in between, etc. And then we'll talk about next steps. As a reminder, here are your advisory boards and commissions. You see an asterisk down there for two boards with different circumstances. One, the African American Affairs Board has not been seated. There has been conversations around the process there. And then also the Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities. As of today, that board is only appointed by the mayor. And then there's been conversation around structuring that board to align with your other boards and commissions where the entire council appoints that board. And so we'll have conversations there, or you all will, about how you want that to function. Okay? At your last meeting, there was an ask for us to align the boards and commissions with the strategic plan. So that's what you see here. There may be a question as to why Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs is under Economic Development and Innovation. And I'll say their mission is to advise City Council on barriers that impact the Hispanic and immigrant community in social, economic, and vocational pursuits. So I had that question, so I just wanted to answer it ahead of time. All right? We do recognize that on yesterday we adopted a new strategic plan, so at that time we'll adjust on July 1. Growth and Natural Resources is here, as well as the Community Engagement Board under Organizational Excellence, because their mission being nurturing a citywide approach to community engagement that promotes inclusion through trust, transparency, and mutual respect. Staff was also asked to look at mission or goal alignment of your advisory boards and commissions in addition to the strategic plan. And we also wanted to add the departments that support the boards and commissions. So I'll walk you through the next two slides. So on the far left is the board or commission. The one in bold would be, in the event you choose to take an action of a merger consolidation, would be the parent board. The department is in the middle. Again, the strategic plan alignment And on the far right, it says new total. So remember, you have 19 boards. So that's just showing you what it would bring your count down to. All right? So here, the Historic Resources and Museum Advisory Board was one you had a lot of conversation about last month. So there is an opportunity and alignment with their mission and goals to place the Historic Cemeteries Advisory Board underneath it. Another example of boards and commissions with similar goals and alignment is the Human Relations potentially being the parent board, and then you see several boards listed there underneath it. They're all within our Equity and Inclusion Department, soon to be Economic and Social Advancement. And then again, you see the Strategic Plan. Sorry, I didn't mean to point that at you. But Strategic Plan, there's two categories there. And then again, if you were to take both actions, that would get your count from 19 to 16. I won't use the pointer, so I won't hit Robert in the face with it. Next, again, similar goal and alignment for your consideration. The Transit Authority, we did have a board and commission member survey. This is one that came up there, as well as conversations from staff, board and commission members, conversations with council. The Transit Authority could be a parent board, with BPAC being one that is consolidated with it. They are both in the Transportation Department. You see the Strategic Plan alignment and the total. And then last there, with similar mission and goal alignment, is Stormwater, and then EAB, the Environmental Advisory Board. So we're going to pause there for discussion for you all to give us some guidance around what feels good as far as potential mergers or consolidations.
Anybody have reactions? Go ahead.
Thank you so much. No, I think merging is a great thought. I know the historic cemeteries, I have spoken with them, and they are completely on board with merging. I think maybe some more just discussion on the human relations. It's a lot of boards that get consolidated, and I think understanding what would be the responsibility of those who currently serve on the Human Relations Commission. Is it their responsibility to talk to the other boards? I think we can have some discussion on what that looks like. And then in transit, I'm wondering, is there also alignment with putting, not that they meet, but RDU, since it's airport, we're talking about transit. Right now we just have bicycles and buses, but if we have planes, as well, would that just, for organizational purposes, not that they mean the same thing, but would that also be able to merge under there? Or my first initial thoughts on that?
So I'm going to start with transit and then touch the other ones. I still got to get a better understanding of what it would look like when we talk about putting bicycle and pads under the Transit Authority. Are we talking about they're separate and they just help me understand that, because the Transit Authority is very specific on its role, and I'm trying to understand that connection.
And I'll, excuse me, I'm happy to speak to that, and would welcome Ms. Mosley to weigh in if she would like to. So I think the idea there is, if you were to consider that, a couple of things related to that particular merger. Number one, there has been some conversation around the potential renaming. It's a Transit Authority is the titling of that board now. It's not truly an authority in the general sense of what an authority, typical Centennial Authority being a perfect example, or the Airport Authority being another example. So that would be something we might recommend for consideration. If you brought them together to, number one, adjust that name, and you could change, if you were to bring BPAC in, you could amend the purpose, the bylaws, the structure to reflect what it is that you'd want, really signaling to those members what the new charge of that board is. So even though Transit Authority right now, to your point, council member, is specifically focused on transit side, not bike pedestrian issues, we would recommend that, the languaging in the bylaw reflect the new vision for what that combined board would focus on. that makes sense. So,
It does, but my understanding and having served on the transit authority, basically they have control. They help direct the entire system outside of monetary, the fiduciary responsibility. That comes back to the council. They have anything that's related to the fiduciary responsibility. But when we start talking about where stops are going to be placed, how routes are going to be changed, like those are very in-depth conversations, even though they have subcommittees that goes into that. So I'm just trying to formulate, because I haven't served on the bike and ped piece. So my understanding of what they do is mainly the focus is on helping develop our bike infrastructure and the policies around it. But when we talk about the transit authority, they specifically, like, if we want to go and change routes, it goes to the authority, the subcommittee looks at it, they work with staff, and then they'll make a recommendation, vote it up or down if that route changes or not.
Well, I just have one brainstorm here because
Yeah.
I'm kind of agnostic. I'm not arguing either way,
Yeah.
but I do know we've had Councilor Silver talk a lot about pedestrian net zero and the importance of sidewalks and pedestrian safety. And I was looking at Charlotte's plan on mobility.
Right.
So you could have like a mobility committee,
Make it a mobility
and then you're
committee.
thinking about how do you get the pedestrians, to the bus stops, to the transit stops, bus rapid transit, whatever it is. So, I mean, again, that may be too far
But does
fetched,
the bike
but I
and
could
ped,
see.
and this is where I need help, does the bike and ped committee, because I haven't been to their meetings, and I know that historically they've come around parks, do they place sidewalks?
My sense is they're more advocates, right, for biking, and they do.
So
I mean,
it's the goal. So that's the conversation we would need to have.
Yeah.
Right.
Do we want to say help us place sidewalks where historically staff is kind of, because we just changed the policy
right.
for
It's
our
more
sidewalks,
automatic. Yeah, it's
where
more
we're
automatic.
using data to help placement of sidewalks.
If I may, so just not here to convince you one way or
Yeah,
another.
I'm just asking to understand.
Just to share and having conversations with staff and transportation, obviously willing to do whatever the council's desire is. Individuals in transportation some of them did see support in, from a policy standpoint, being able to look at things more cohesively from the transportation perspective, and then just looking at the mission of BPAC on making recommendations and implementation for programs, policies, regulations, and funding priorities. I mean, that can be anything, to Mr. Riley's point, and what those bylaws look like in framing in the future.
Okay.
and another thing I'll add, just in addition, all of those boards that you saw that were not highlighted, the ones that are essentially recommended to be blended with a new parent board, we're still recommending that those groups remain standing subcommittees. So a focus on that specific issue, in this case, bike and pedestrian issues.
So it's just
would
transit
necess-
committee, basically.
Right,
And
right.
the transit committee will have a subcommittee on bikes and peds.
Correct.
Correct.
On routes and the marketing piece for our buses and and I'm just saying all the I'm listing all of the things that are
Yeah.
there so that you all have the information.
And I think to add on to that, the question that I would have is, if they are absorbed, whether it's Human Relations Commissions, or is that still something that we appoint, or does that now become the Transportation
Sure.
Committee to do that?
And we'll get
Get to
into
that.
that. We
Okay.
wanted to, our thinking was we would have a conversation first about potential alignments, then we'll go into the process that you all can consider if you choose to align or merge boards, and then lastly, going into those subcommittees. And so on these previous slides here, we'll go to either one of these examples that we'll use. The first one there, historic resources would be the board, and then historic cemeteries will become a standing, permanent subcommittee of that board. Same for transit or any of the other boards up there.
Can you help me better understand, let's just say this happens, what does that do to staff impact? How does that help, does that hinder what you need to implement these boards staff-wise?
Right, it varies. So it's helpful for the departments that the boards are already in the same department, and they would have to restructure the way in which they support. And when we get to the next section and we talk about the boards that are currently in human relations and the way in which, if you all decide to merge them, we'll talk about that impact and what it looks like.
And maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of you, but I noticed in your breakout you indicated that the Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs Board was more economic development focused, and then the other boards seem to be more like social. So I guess the question is going to be, if you do the merger and you move that particular board under the Human Relations Commission, and it's more heavily focused on the economic development, like how's that really going to work from an alignment standpoint when everything else is more socially focused?
That's at the discretion of the body. Again, just all these recommendations here are from a number of places, from council retreat, from the committee meetings, from the survey, conversations with staff, and board and commission members.
And I will say, in that specific case, I think staff has done our best approximation of where they fall in terms of the alignment of the boards to the strategic plan. You could certainly make a case in a couple of these that it could go elsewhere. So just because we've done our best to try to group them, but it's not to suggest that there is not overlap or that those boards that we've shown in one key focus area could be in another. And I think Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs is probably one of those that they, can move between other. It's not just economic development. There are also, we'll say, social aspects to their work as well. So just want to make that note.
And also, as far as I think about the Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disabilities, a lot of times I can see the issue we had 2 years ago. I'm glad it's at least 2 years ago now with paratransit. And we went to the Mayor's Committee of Disabilities to try to have the conversation and look into that. I guess that even if they were under Human Relations, that would still be an option to say, hey, go to the subcommittee to look at it.
Well, you could put that under mobility. To me, I will say one of my thoughts when I look at this is I don't like assigning some people to be subcommittees and others to be full committee. I like the idea of you merge and then everybody has a subcommittee. So for the transit, I would call it transit and mobility. And then you have a subcommittee that could be persons with disabilities and ADA accessibility issues across all transportation.
Transportation, yeah.
You could have pedestrians if somebody wanted to do pedestrian, and then you could do so that you've got sort of an equal treatment and not making some boards. That's one other option.
That's true.
Which I would prefer on that. And then it would make a mega committee on human relations if all these people merged in. And then you could, I think the other idea was to put the African American as a standing right subcommittee. So you could have Hispanic and immigration, African American. I don't know what the other current subcommittees are.
And it sounds like we're going into process and logistics.
Okay.
So would y'all like to go to that next?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I like it. All right. So let's talk about that. So from our perspective, there are, assuming that you all choose to merge any of the groups we talked about in the previous slides, and you can decide which ones later. There are two options. One being immediate reduction. So that's reaching an ideal board size in a shorter period, or natural attrition where you do it through letting terms expire, not doing appointments or reappointments. So in the case of the human relations example, staff would recommend that you take option one, because when we look at all the groups that could potentially be merged in there, we did a count and it would be 52 people. And that's just, not manageable or efficient. And so it would be our recommendation, if that's something that you desire, that you look at the immediate reduction example. So that could be, setting a specific number, allowing board and commission, the seated members to reapply, you all and we can go into those details later. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me stop there and get your reactions to these two options around immediate reduction and natural attrition.
I would definitely say when you're looking at the Human Relations Commission, if we follow, the recommendations, and you have, 18 groups?
The boards and commissions?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That would
19.
fall under the Human Relations Commission, right? Yeah, that one in particular, you probably have to do an immediate reduction because natural attrition would just take way too long to try to figure it out. Some of the other ones, maybe natural attrition would work better because, for example, with historic cemeteries and some of those boards where the struggle has been to get enough people who want to participate and serve on the board, you may not necessarily have to do a reduction, but definitely Human Relations Commission would be one that I would think you'd have to do something pretty immediate to make it manageable.
Do y'all have thoughts?
I mean, for me, it comes down to, I think we have to use a mixture of both, depending on the boards.
Okay.
I don't even know how many people are on, the mayor's thing about the Mayor's Council for Disabilities, and you look at Bike and Ped, and I know there's 11 people on the Transit Authority. So that's another big number I think you're going to have.
Yeah.
So how do you we just got to figure that out. That will probably be another immediate reduction. But like you said, on boards where we've struggled to appoint people, then you can go natural attrition. I think it just comes down to we would have to look at the board, the shape up, the number of people that are going into it, figure out what the ideal number is, and then determine which method works best.
And just for sake of conversation, BPAC has 12, and the mayor's persons with disabilities also has 12.
So that's 24 plus 11. You're at almost 45.
And for me, before we talk about reduction, I think I still want to better understand how that flow goes. So again, if you've got Human Relations Commission, how many are on that one? You said 18?
I think 18 was the number
Oh,
of
I'm
boards
sorry.
and commissions.
Oh,
I
that's-
think that was
sorry.
separate than the number on the committee.
Got it.
Human
So however
Relations
many-
Commission has 16 seats, but right now they have 14 members.
Right. So rather, in my mind, and the way I'm thinking of it, just so you
Sure.
understand my process, I don't think that it's beneficial to reduce that number. I think it's what is their purpose and what are they, if they are now in charge, not in charge, but if they are the center trying to be that communication between all boards, it's now refocusing their mission to then be that conversation. Because we're not looking, in my mind, to replace anyone on Hispanic immigrant. It's how does this overboard now make sure that the conversation is happening and they're uplifting those voices. So for me, the consolidation at this moment, I'm kind of like, I feel like I need to better understand their purpose before I can say, let's reduce. That's, I don't know if I'm there yet.
And maybe just to add a little piece of information that could be helpful to this conversation. So when we say reduce, what we envisioned in terms of the board side, we'll just say ideal board size for the parent board. Mm-hmm. We are not suggesting that current size change. So in the case of Human Relations, as an example, it's seated with 16 members now. We're not suggesting that number change. We are simply saying that if you were, again, just using the Human Relations example, if you were to bring those other boards to align them, group them, merge them with Human Relations, you would get into one big board, one big Human Relations board. You'd get 50 plus members. We would say you could either one or two routes. You keep 16 members, 16 seats available, 52 individuals potentially competing for 16 seats. That's the current size of the Human Relations Board. So we're saying that's the number that you'd stick with. It's just you would have to figure out a way to bring all the other board members that are coming in. You can either get to that number immediately by making them reapply, or you could stick with a 52-member board for the time being and get to that 16 number through natural attrition over time as appointments fall off, people resign, other reasons. So does that help to kind of conceive of
I mean,
how
I
we're-
understand. I think I understand what you're saying. I'm just thinking of it. I feel like I'm thinking of it differently instead of it being because you get the 52, and I guess in my mind, merge doesn't mean that I have a 52-member board. It means that I have one board that's looking over it, but these other boards still act independently. They're still their own board. That then there's just communication instead of 52 members. It's still 5 different entities. Just that's where I was asking about staff needs, because as of right now, each one of those has a staff, and so I do understand the purpose of we want to reduce so that we don't have as much on to staff. So I get all of that, but I feel like we have to decide which way we want to go. Do we want to go with the 52-member board, which we go, or do we say, or do we want to just align better like goals but still keep the board separate? I don't know where I am on that, but that's how I'm seeing it.
And I guess kind of sort of a follow-up to your question, because I'm trying to visualize how it all works. So Human Relations Commission, you have 16 members, and let's say Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs Board becomes a sub-board, a subcommittee, and it has how many members now?
Right now it has 17.
17. So you'd have a board that's a subcommittee with 17 members under a board that's like 16 members, or would you just say, because Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs Board is becoming a sub, that we cap it at like maybe 6 members of that smaller board that reports to the.
Okay, I see that.
Is that kind of what y'all are
It
thinking?
is.
Okay.
Yes.
And
I'm just making sure. All right.
Yes.
Right, and so we would have to get to that number 6. So there's 17 of Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs in this example. We would have to get to 6 one of these ways.
Gotcha. Okay.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Thank you
We're
for that.
tracking now.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
And I mean,
It's a lot.
Natural
We
attrition.
realize it's a lot.
Realize.
It's a lot.
natural attrition is absolutely right, the preferred mechanism, if at all possible.
Okay. Okay.
Yep, agreed.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I tend to think, let's give it a whirl with the merger, just because 30 boards and commissions is a lot, and I think that's been challenging for everybody, both the volunteers, the staff, and council, to juggle all of this. So, I mean, I'm willing to give it a try.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
All right.
next section. All right, we had that discussion. So the subcommittee. So in the instance that you all decide that current standalone boards become subcommittees of other boards, staff is recommending 2 options. So council could appoint members to the subcommittees, or the parent board or commission. So we've been saying human relations. I'll just keep that for the theme. Human relations could select subcommittees from its membership. So we see these 2 as items for discussions amongst the group. Can I provide any additional clarity on the 2 options?
I mean, for me, I'm not too caught up on if the parent board place people on the subcommittee or not. Where I'm at is making sure we have the skills for that subcommittee within the board. So if we say human relations, then how many slots do we want to say, hey, let's set aside 3 slots for Hispanic, 3 slots for African American Affairs, or whatever, with the intent that those individuals we know will be part of the subcommittee. That's kind of, and it was probably leaning towards the first one, the more I talk about it out loud. But that's how I look at it, is that whatever subcommittee we put under it, we need to make sure that we put people within that body that can address that issue. So think about it. If we say we have a subcommittee for Hispanic, say, I'm just pulling a number out of the air. I'm going to use the number 3. For 3, African American Affairs Board, 3. And then we say, I saw substance abuse. We have 3 for that. We're at 9 people already. And we hadn't even decided if, let's say we move the mayor's Committee for Disabilities over to mobility. So you still have Right now, how many people on the Human Relations Board?
14.
So right now, it's 14. So you can say, well, maybe 9 slots are set for those 3, and that leaves 5 that you just fill in for human relations. I mean, that's probably how I would get there, but because there's no need to have a subcommittee, and we don't appoint the people that can address the subcommittee issues.
But a part of me wonders, if you've got folks who are serving on the Human Relations Commission and they're doing the oversight of all these boards and commissions, would it be better that if you're on the HRC, that's your commitment, and then other people have opportunities to serve as a part of the subcommittee versus allowing folks who are on the parent board? Because, you could have several folks who want to be on every subcommittee and kind of dominating all the processes. And so if you're on the parent board, leave opportunities for other people to participate on the subcommittees and kind of do the work. This is my thought.
So my question then is, what are we trying to fix? Because all we're doing is taking boards that are independent and placing under a subcommittee to still be a board.
But I think they'll be doing different work, so they'd still have the opportunities with work plans and things along those lines. But I think it makes the processes more efficient. It makes staff time more efficient when you've got these subcommittees operating under a parent body versus kind of being out on their own, and you're trying to corral, the work of 30 different boards. And
So I'm trying to picture this: if I'm a staff person for human relations, and they have 3 subcommittees, the subcommittees are going to have their own meetings. So if I'm the staff person, am I responsible for the human relations board and each individual subcommittee?
probably not. I would think that'd be a lot.
So currently in equity and inclusion, there are different staff members that support the standalone boards. And so we would leave that at the discretion of the department to determine how they would support the potential subcommittees. So they have multiple staff to support standalone boards.
As of right now.
As of right now. So I would assume they would use multiple staff to support.
So nothing changes.
subcommittees.
Well,
The number of boards, standalone
The number of
boards would
boards change, but the staff, which goes back to your question
right.
about the impact of staff,
Sure.
the impact of staff doesn't change.
Sure.
But
That's
I
fair.
feel like to what you're saying, then what's the point? I feel like we're trying to give clarity. What we heard from the surveys, what I've heard going through, is they're like, what are we doing here? And so I think, still having the same tools that we're doing, we're trying to align purpose and say, okay, these are the people that beyond us, that you come and talk to me, you have a network. So it's automatic connection with other boards and committees, which is what I hear from boards all the time. I want to meet with other ones. I want to be able to give them the framework to just have that at their disposal so that their work can be strengthened. I'm not sure that the solution is, my goal is to just take staff out. I don't know that that's my goal. I just want to make sure that they feel, as board members and volunteers, that they're given the tools needed to do the work.
And I think the other part of it is that provides an opportunity for efficiency and not having boards do duplicate type work. So if everybody's under the Human Relations Commission and, the Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs Board is doing something, and let's just say the African American Affairs Board wants to do something similar, where you've got a parent body that can say, well, y'all are both trying to do something, so the committees could be working together or something along those lines, so you're not having 10 events trying to address the same issue, when
So-
you can kind of merge together and do one event and pull in populations to address those issues.
So I hear that. So I'm going to ask this question, because we made a change with human relations and other boards when we did some realignment was it 3-4 years ago? We did didn't we do a realignment under support staff, because we put it all under the previous what was her name? She's no longer with us, and we have a new person.
Dr. Hamilton?
Yes, under Dr. Hamilton.
Yeah.
When we made that change and put a couple boards under her.
Yes.
And Evan, can you speak? Because
Yeah.
to my understanding, what we're trying to do now, that I see that was a test case.
Yeah,
And then it just failed because we didn't, what did council not give that for it to be successful?
I think maybe to Councilmember Fort's point, what I think this proposed structure would do is certainly bring alignment where we have certainly heard the feedback of
Right.
a bit of a feeling of boards stepping on each other's toes because there is not that connection that you could. It's a more efficient, more connected way to deliver services in the same space. I will say is what I think ultimately some of this would allow for. That the way we're currently structured, they're in the same department,
Right,
but
they're not.
But
They're in the same department, but they weren't ever
right. The boards,
connected.
right. The board, they basically they have centralized support. In the case of human relations, they have
Gotcha.
support coming from the same department. But in terms of the actual functioning of those boards, they're still very much independent of one another.
So we missed the
So,
alignment
that's
of the
right.
boards when we put them under.
Yeah, I think it's
We didn't
this
complete
is,
it.
Yeah, I think this
And
is
just so
the
y'all
next
know, I'm not against this. I'm asking these questions because the engineer in me is like, what are we trying to fix?
The process.
Yeah, the process. What are we trying? Because the last thing I want us to do is make changes, move forward, and nothing gets better.
Yeah, certainly. This,
And to answer this question, now that we're on this, I tend to think I don't want to give up appointing members too, because it's what we're doing right now. That would be my thought. But we do have, the Parks Board, we have the RHDC who give us recommendations. So I think there's always that, could that be that possibility where they give recommendations that we can choose to take or not, just like we do with RHDC or with Parks Board. That way they're telling us what they would like to see, but we ultimately have final say. Because I hesitate in the second option to not have that authority, to give up that control when this is advice that we're all trying to get back. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
So what we want, for them to provide us skills and what the needs are for the board versus specific individuals, because I think some of the feedback we've gotten is that in certain boards, not all, but in certain boards it sort of felt like it was kind of cliquish and people who had friends and they would say, well, I want, Susie Smith to be the person versus whatever Susie's skills are. So,
Right. I mean, I feel like that happens on council too. I think we're all, oh, that's so-and-so's friend, we should do that. So I think that comes up whether it's them or not. But I hear your point. And I do like the idea, how do we give skill sets instead of, some of them we do, communication board, we've got skill sets over here, but we don't have that across the board. So is that another aspect that we could add so we know who's going on?
I was just going to add that a little reminder that in the universal bylaws template, there's language that excludes a nominations committee, but it does say that you all can accept recommendations at your preference. So that it says that in the universal bylaws language already.
And I'm going to go a little deeper and say, shouldn't we determine what skills are needed for that board?
It depends. I mean, because you think about the design review committee and the planning commission. If we're not necessarily as involved in it every day, we may miss some skill sets. So
Gotcha.
sometimes they know a little bit better about what's lacking based on what's coming before them and the conversations that they're having. So I don't know.
It's probably a mixed bag because I'm thinking too, our staff liaison should know that information. Say, hey, council, you all said for design skills you need an architect and an attorney, a land, whatever. And based upon the people who we have, this is what we're losing and what we're missing. So that's just what I'm thinking. Because the way I see it goes back to your point of, well, my friend or such and such. The way to take that out is we determine the skills of the people that we need, and then we make sure our staff liaison keeps that. And we can go out to the industry and say, hey, for this type of board, do you all feel there's some gaps? But I just feel as a council, we should hold on to that power of these are the skills we need, because we're asking the board for direction on issues that either we're approving in their work plan based on information we've sent them or not.
And I'll tag on to that because I definitely agree. I would like to see something where and we'll use Planning Commission as an example. There are no reason. There are no skill sets there. And so what I think is skill sets might be different than what you think is skill sets. So when we asked the current chair and she said lawyer, developer, architect, whatever she said, but I was like, but I think there should be community advocate there. I think there needs to be that position. Assigning that would then give us that framework to go, okay, this is what we're missing, not based on what one chair may assume, but what the body has agreed is a collective and diverse array of skill sets. So I would tend to agree that we should definitely look towards doing that.
I guess I'm going to turn back to staff and say, what have you gleaned from this conversation? What do you need from us?
I think I'll say you're doing quite well. I know this is a difficult task and a lot to present to you. I think we're moving through it well. So what I have heard thus far, to the first question on when the boards emerged, how does that process work? And the desire, I think, is for natural attrition to be the preferred option for getting boards to their, I'll say in quotations, ideal size. To the question of subcommittee structure, I think I've heard strong desire for council to retain the appointment authority for those subcommittee members. We did make a bullet on that slide, I think, that said if you so chose, you could consider an individual who was serving on a parent board for appointment to a subcommittee, but we would allow you to retain that discretion. You don't have to. It could be some,
Does that count as their two? Would that count as their two committees? Because we have right now we have a limit. We have a limit that no one can serve more than two committees.
We talked about that. I think we have to.
I think it should. I think it would.
I think that was actually a debate that we had. So we were looking for direction, but we could consider it service on two. If you were on a parent board and also appointed to a subcommittee, that would be your two. We could absolutely build that in. So I think the other point there was subcommittees, and maybe this is an unanswered question. We have suggested that those subcommittees shrink. Essentially, boards that were formerly standalone that are becoming standing subcommittees, that the size of that subcommittee would be limited to, I think we've said 5.
Yeah, the average number is between 5 and 6.
Yes, and so that we did do some homework to evaluate for current boards that have subcommittees, how large are they generally, and that's the number that we came back with, was on average 5 to 6. So that would be what we would recommend. So essentially, you'd have five appointments opportunities for those boards that become standing subcommittees. Is what we would.
Do we want to limit the number of subcommittees?
Well,
under a parent?
So it'll come back to you all in their bylaws for approval. So, and that'll be on the next follow-up slides, that there was an ask that all subcommittees be approved by the council. And so at that time, you can now, or at that time.
It's kind of a conversation. Do we, because if we're saying we want to limit around 5 people on the subcommittee, and then you have a group that has 4 subcommittees plus a parent, then I'm just trying to figure out we're at 20. Like, my question is, when the big body meets, are the subcommittee members required to go to the big body meeting?
I think the sort of arrangement we would envision. These are all good questions. I think what we had conceived was essentially a bit of a liaison. Not that there'd be a liaison between the parent board and that standing subcommittee.
And the liaison will be required to go to the big body meeting.
And there would be some have some engagement between the liaison for that subcommittee and the parent board.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I know we focus a lot on human relations because that has the most subcommittees. Is there advice from from staff on just the overall nature of the boards of what a goal number is? I mean, in a lot of them we have not quorum issue. I don't think it goes that far, but we have attendance issues in all of them. And does that mean that we have too many people and it's just too big? Do you have any advice outside of those that are the big parent
I'll
companies.
use historic cemeteries. I spoke with staff there, and their recommendation for a subcommittee was also 5. They said 5 would be. They currently have 7 members of the standalone, and they said 5 would be a better number because of attendance, because of participation. That would be ideal for them. Spoke with some other members of staff liaisons who shared again 5 to 6 is the ideal number for the subcommittee.
Thank
So-
you. Thank you.
So,
Back to your question, Councilmember Branch. I don't know that we want to necessarily limit the number of subcommittees, only because I think there's a variety of like interests and initiatives and things along those lines, and so we can figure out a process that's much more manageable. And I know, like when the mayor and I initially had this conversation, we were looking at a neighboring municipality that went through and just kind of like chopped a lot of their boards and commissions because they had just gotten out of control and had really become unmanageable. So I think the ultimate exercise for the public for us is just trying to figure out a way to make the process much more manageable, to make the opportunity to participate be more effective and worthwhile for folks, because you had so many people kind of floating around saying that, I'm on this board, I show up for meetings, don't necessarily know what we're doing, and just kind of seeming like things were just not really running well and not necessarily being productive for the people who are participating, which made it challenging to get more people to participate. So I think ultimately we want folks to be able to have some process to come in and kind of communicate to council about different things that are happening in the community. So I wouldn't be interested in limiting the number of subcommittees, just making sure we have a process that's more efficient.
Right. And the reason why I asked that question was around, we're talking about committees that currently are on their own, making subcommittees of committees. But my question is, what about committees that already have subcommittees? So I'm going to use the Transit Authority as an example. The Transit Authority has 4 subcommittees already. So if we add other things to it, now we're looking at 6 or 7 subcommittees. So that's why I'm asking that question.
Right.
Do we have a list of committees that already have subcommittees, and how does that look? And even if you have a subcommittee that you're making, you have a committee that you're making a subcommittee, what if that committee you're making a subcommittee has subcommittees?
And so our thought process was, because all of the advisory boards and
I've been on this bike a while.
It's okay. Our thought process was, because all of the boards and commissions have to revamp their bylaws and work plans with the new changes, that they would include all of that for your approval in the late summer, fall anyway. And so everyone's going to just have to take a look at what they have, see what makes sense based off of the decisions of the council and this committee, and realign their capacity and decisions at that point.
Can we get a list of the current subcommittees of committees?
Sure.
Because I think that data would be helpful.
and I will, not to add to this muckiness, but you raised the question. I think we are also drawing a distinction between some of these groups that commissions that already have existing subcommittees and the standing subcommittees that would be created. Right. Because again, the direction we've heard is that council would like to retain appointment authority to subcommittees. We're just saying for those standing subcommittees, meaning groups that were formerly independent boards, would be the area and opportunity for appointment. Meaning, so
that's fair.
Because
and that has to be just drawn out.
Right.
Correct.
We just want to kind of
So
distinguish
the
in between those
subcommittees
two
that
kinds.
council may not be appointing members to right now, those would remain as is. We wouldn't
Right.
touch those. Just
Right.
those that are currently standing boards and commissions.
Because technically speaking, if I'm thinking of the Parks Board, which also
Right.
has
Right,
4
yes.
subcommittees,
Right.
Yes.
that's already built into their
Members of
work.
the
So if
Parks
we
Board.
added, and I'm just throwing things out, if we added BPAC to them, if we added this, that would just add to their discussion. It wouldn't add to their daily work. So they're able to continue with their ongoing subcommittees,
Correct.
and then say, okay, we need to make space for BPAC and this and these other ones that have been added just to get a touch point. Because all they're doing in the big meeting is getting a touch point of the work. They're not holding the BPAC meeting. They're not holding those other ones. So I don't know that that would need to change if you've had subcommittees. I think that it's just another item.
Correct.
Can I ask one more crazy question? So I'm on a subcommittee, and I'm just using this as an example. Say I'm on bikes and pads, and say we place them under transit. Transit has a route committee, and say I want to be part of that route. Can I be part of that route committee? And if I am, does that make me part of transit? I'm asking that question because they're a subcommittee.
Sure, but
of
I would say
transit.
you would have to then get placed onto RTA in order to be part of that subcommittee there, because that's already part of RTA. So if you're BPAC, in order to be part of it, you can be part of the discussion because all those things are there. You can come and sit at the meeting and say, ask to be heard if you need to be. But if you want to be a member on there, then you would have to submit an application to RTA to be part of that.
So let me just prepare, like a different scenario, again, just for thought, is if you actually merged all of these to be equal and you don't have this hierarchy.
Right.
And so let's say with the human relations, I mean, you got 50 people at the moment. Dick's Park Conservancy was 50 people. So believe me, I know what that's like. It's not easy. But let's say you all just merge and then you agree what your subcommittees are and all those people are meeting together and they decide what subcommittees they're going to be on. I mean, to me, that innately seems a little simpler than different subcommittees getting a point. Yeah, I'm just,
Yeah, because it gets.
man,
Yeah.
I mean, I know y'all, I mean, at some point I will defer to staff as to how you think this would best work, but man, it just seems really complicated than just
Sure.
one big merger, which gets everybody working together and all of that intersectionality, and then subcommittees that we would certainly approve, but we're appointing to that master board. We try to winnow it down, and then they can decide.
My
Who's
only
on
fear,
what?
my only fear in that, and maybe it's just me not understanding,
Yeah.
is that if we go from 50 and we're saying, oh, that's too much, and we start to limit, now we're cutting down the people that were appointed to these boards. Now, some of them are justified. Sometimes we don't have enough positions, so I think that there's an argument to discuss there. But I fear that when we do that large one, instead of nothing changes the way it's happening right now, other than they're just aligned over here. So I don't know that there's a huge process shift. I do feel like if we make it one big, Human Relations now has 52 people and they do their own, I feel like we may lose some. Maybe I just not understanding, but it feels like we're talking about reducing at that point, so we wouldn't have as many voices. But
Yeah, well, I
maybe
think you would
that's what
shift,
the
I
goal
would,
is.
if you have that broad a task, I would probably keep the full board at like 20, let's say 25, and they would have 5 subcommittees. African American, Hispanic immigration, but everybody would just be on one. To me, it just seems
And
like
to your
it's simpler.
point, I think your point reduces the voices than the other.
Okay.
Because if we're saying the number, remember we said 5, so some of these boards now have 12. So we reduce it to 5.
That's fair.
But if you have the big body, then and let it go from there, then that they could decide they want 6 on one board or 4 or 11 on another board, but the whole body number is set.
Yeah.
Maybe so.
I'd rather have fewer, bigger boards
Okay.
and then manageable subcommittee work sessions than, I mean, right now it seems like you're around 12, 14 for most of these boards, so, I mean, bigger.
So just maybe a question on clarification. So in that scenario, are you suggesting that the standing subcommittees would essentially, the subcommittee structure of these combined boards would be determined by the membership of that board? So would we be doing away with the concept of these standing subcommittees, again, using human relations as the case? Are we saying, combine all of those groups that were offered up for merger and allow them to determine what subcommittees exist
Well, I think,
just
Go ahead.
seeking staff clarification?
I would say no. We keep them. We say you have the African American Affairs Board, but we appoint everyone to Human Relations.
Okay.
And these standard committees, you
Populate as you see
populate.
fit. Okay.
That's how I'm looking at it.
yeah,
and-
they would populate
They
their
will
own committees.
populate it.
I see.
But
So-
we do the appointments to the big board, and then they populate to the subcommittees that we set as standard. So they have to have these boards.
And I mean, to me, I know this is frustrating for people sitting here. You probably have things you would like to say, but and I don't know whether we're doing public comment, but what I heard was somewhat from Human Relations, and having served on Human Relations, there's people on that Human Relations board that, I mean, there's a lot of intersectionality in that board, and it could be LGBTQ, it has economic issues that's shared with immigration issues or Hispanic issues, which, cross over with just racial dialogue or interreligious dialogue. So, to me, all these groups meeting together, I mean, is valuable, and then having these, subcommittees that allow more, and I think that may already, anyway, I'll stop talking.
So if I may, I want to repeat back what it sounded like may have been a point of consensus there around subcommittee structure. So in that arrangement, the board would be merged. All these various boards acting independently would be merged.
Keep going.
Council would not appoint the members of the subcommittee. The subcommittee members would be seated
Right.
by the board itself.
We would approve the
Right,
subcommittees,
approve the subcommittees.
but they
and-
could
okay.
point and self-select into
Into the-
whatever work groups they wanted. So if somebody came in off Hispanic and immigration, they might decide, you know what, I really want to work on whatever a subcommittee that may be different than that.
Okay. Understood.
And then from those subs, they can have a liaison back.
Well, and they don't even really need it
Yeah,
because
they
they're all
don't need one
meeting.
because they're all meeting. Yeah.
So you solve that problem.
Yeah.
I see. So the council appointee, the council appointments happen at the board level, and then the subcommittees are self-selecting among already appointed members of the board, essentially.
With the hypothesis that most groups would go to the subcommittee they were coming from, right?
Right.
I mean, if you were on Hispanic Immigration Board, you would probably stick to that. But
And then we set the requirements to the big body that saying we need someone for whatever Hispanic point of view or LGBT, whatever we set our standard.
for the larger
subs,
body, you
we
might
set that
say,
for the larger
yeah.
body. These slots are set aside.
skill sets or
For skill sets.
perspectives or something.
I think we have that. So,
Is there any, before we move on from that, just from a staff perspective, is there any hesitation or thoughts on the pros and cons of that?
Meeting space, they would
Me-
probably have to meet virtually only. We just don't have a space to put 52 people.
I think that's the thing that immediately comes to mind, at least when these boards initially come together. And we could, so in this arrangement, we came out of the gate thinking what the ideal board size, even in a blended scenario, was going to be kind of the current size of the parent board. I think we probably need to, based on this direction, give some consideration around what that maybe a better ideal size would be to accomplish your
Yeah,
goal.
curious,
Yeah.
within City Hall, like what is the capacity of this room? How many
Yeah.
people comfortably? This is not exactly comfortable.
I would-
We can figure that out.
could,
And then I
yeah.
think the other thought would just be quorum. So they would need like 30 people for quorum or something like that to make quorum.
And I'm going to put this out here because I know it puts a lot on our good RTN and communications department, but we have quite a few community centers that could possibly host a meeting. We also have the Raleigh Convention Center that we own that we could probably try to figure out a way to utilize.
I also think this is a time-limited issue, right? I mean, at some point, you're going to have boards of around maybe 20-something people.
Yeah.
And
'Cause
that
it's gonna
doesn't
dwindle.
seem like a crazy that the city, and I don't know what the new City Hall, I know there's a lot of convening place scheduled for that. I mean, I would just hate for some short-term issue as we naturally attrit to be a limiting factor on what we kind of want to do.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, we will say we will make arrangements
Sure.
to accommodate whatever we need to in that intervening period.
Those are just immediate thoughts.
Yeah,
That
immediate
wasn't-
thoughts.
that
I
wasn't-
Space certainly is
understand,
fair.
again, having
Yeah,
had
That's fair.
cast of thousands.
So if we could, I knew you were asking, Mayor, for kind of the checklist of things. I think we may want to make sure there's clarity around the first topic we were discussing around the boards to come together. So I know that's a meaty one, but if we could,
Can you bring that slide?
yeah,
Yes.
maybe go back and
I
ensure we
can.
got clear guidance on that part. That'd be helpful for us.
And we've already made the decision on the museum and his cemeteries, correct?
Yeah. That's easy.
One that I don't see on here that I would ask about a convention center, that board with the performing arts and arts commission, that all sounds very could be placed together, but I don't see that here. So I don't know if that's something
Yes.
out of the scope.
Thank you for bringing that up. On the follow-up slides, there is a question posed specifically about the Arts Commission and the Public Art Design Board, but not about the convention, the
Yeah.
Performing Arts Board. So maybe we can tie that in.
Yeah, maybe that doesn't. I'm just trying to think of if I'm thinking of arts, and,
Yes.
and I know we have so many boards that do the same thing. I'm like,
Sure.
is that another place of alignment?
So those two boards do not do the same thing. The reason, so my wife was chair of the Arts Commission, and the Arts Commission and their focus and their role in dealing with the arts and their grant process. Like, for instance, they're part of the whole budgeting and grant process and giving out money and working with engineering on some big project or whatever that may need to be done that's artsy. The Raleigh Convention Center group is over the complex, which includes Walnut Creek, Red Hat, Martin Marietta, and the Convention Center, and making sure that how they're being used from a physical standpoint, and their members are the people we appoint there are normally from the hotel industry. The Visitors Bureau has a representative there. So the focus of those two are different. They don't align.
So then my only other thought on the ones that you have was, if you go to this next slide.
Yes.
I know that for stormwater and environmental, I know that there was a specific request to not combine those. And I thought there were, and maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that there was, when I go to stormwater management, there is like the entire staff is there, which is not to be everybody. Not every board is like that. So I'm not saying that anything has changed, but I feel like combining those might confuse and really, for space purposes, may not be conducive for stormwater. But I know I see Wayne here. So did I reflect that appropriately? Okay. So for that one, I would be a little hesitant, or maybe wanting to hear the board of what do we think could be done. Because those meetings, I love going to stormwater, and really combines, all of the employees. So it's employees with advisory, and I don't know what environmental advisory board is. So I don't. If somebody's been the liaison there and can speak to that.
I am.
Okay.
And it's probably more sustainability and innovation focused than stormwater. I mean, I know that we've heard staff, and we know we have $1 billion stormwater management capital program. So to me, when that's like your largest capital program, like having a standalone board that staff is saying is functioning well, I'm willing to just.
And it may be for something like this, we don't merge them, but we align them properly.
Yeah.
So it's more of just aligning them instead of combining them.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
I would say environmental advisory probably has more overlap with parks.
Yeah,
Because there's
I would
all the
think so,
tree
too.
protection and all that kind of stuff. Not that I'm suggesting that either, but just, it's probably got more.
My question, Mayor, you mentioned the Mayor's Council for People with Disabilities. I know it's under Human Relations,
Yeah.
but you're talking about mobility.
Yeah.
So would it can't live in both. So how do we want to?
I mean, who's leading?
Let me ask this question,
Megan.
Mark, because you're on the Transit Authority as well.
Yeah.
So if I may, do you feel you all fall, the Mayor's Council, the Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disability falls more in line with transit needs or with more social needs, or neither?
We do housing, we do other things. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we work on housing, we work on other issues. In the last 2 years, it's mainly been focused on the paratransit program.
Right.
Now we're kind of focusing on scooters and sidewalks, because the paratransit system is kind of basically taken care of. But we deal with other issues other than just transportation.
Got you.
Thank you.
So it may be best to
Do the
Keep them separate,
well, I
or
think
mobility.
mobility sounds like that's the main work plan, and then I'm sure fair housing has some of this, but
And there's no preclusion from
Yeah.
them participating, but I
Correct.
feel that there is, if we could start there and say this is, since these are the concerns we've been talking about, paratransit, we want to work on sidewalks and everything, that sounds very transit oriented
Yeah,
or mobility
transit and
oriented.
Yeah.
So
It's just a
maybe the
starting
key
spot.
is move them more in line with transit, but we got to figure out what the new transit
I'd
route,
call it transit and mobility.
transit
Yeah.
mobility.
I like that.
Transit
Mobility, and that's now,
advisory instead of authority.
yeah,
Transit.
Yeah,
and that's
transit advisory,
BPAC, persons
Transit-
with disabilities,
and then transit
RTA.
authority.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we also get some feedback? You mentioned staff. Can we hear back from our transit? This is our suggestion, but I'd like to hear also from our transit department on their thoughts as well as they're supporting it.
And I will say with the Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disabilities, we want to make sure it's very clear, like, if it ultimately lands under transit, there are a lot of broader issues, because I know like accessibility
is.
to like the website
Yep.
and other things that are not. So we want to make sure we're really clear about what the mission's going to be for that subcommittee, so folks don't think it's only transit focused when there are a diversity of issues that committee actually addresses.
That's why I'm partly torn about wanting to keep it separate.
Well, and part of this could just be I know we have charters, like for fair housing. Wouldn't this also, if we're talking about housing issues and accessibility, wouldn't that come under fair housing? So as long as you've written the right charters, you're touching it in different committees. I mean, maybe that's part of the fair housing, is you make sure you have somebody who understands ADA, accessibility, and those issues, in addition to income-based.
So kind of split it
Yeah.
into
I
different
mean, it's such a
areas.
broad topic, but,
I'm open to conversation.
yeah.
And just thoughts on, I wanted to touch on fair housing. Right now, we're calling it the Fair Housing Hearing Board, and we don't necessarily have hearings there, so I'm wondering.
Advisory board.
Yeah, Fair Housing Advisory.
Advisory board.
That way, there's not this expectation that there's going to be a
Yeah.
hearing that we never have.
I understand that's been a topic of discussion, and I think at the last work plan presentation, I think the chair was suggesting that to the council, that might be something that needed to be considered, that
Yeah.
name, so.
Because
yeah.
I think there has some changes at Jones Street will have to happen to give us that authority again.
Yeah.
For the holding the
To
hearings.
hold hearings.
Yeah. Not changing the name, but just
Yeah.
actually
Yeah, we
holding
can change the
hearings.
name.
Yeah, okay.
It's Fair Housing Advisory Commission,
Board, commission, whatever.
Advisory Board, okay.
And what I do want to say, what I really like about this up here is how you're connecting it to the strategic plan. Because I think as we are attempting to make sure people understand where their voice is most impactful, to say, oh, this strategic plan initiative, which means these committees that council, so this is where you live, really helps people line and go, okay, if I don't know exactly who to go to, we can go to that committee and find out. You know, so I really appreciate you adding that in here.
So with the new titles that we just approved yesterday,
That's why I think we should combine some of them. You can't have 7, you got to combine some of them. But they're combined here too, so it's not going to be any more
Right.
confusing. Like I like it. So thank you.
So thank you for that. Did we, are we good on, did we get all the answers there?
Yes.
So shift to follow-up items? Okay.
I guess the art was one I have a question on.
Yes,
Okay,
that
is that where you're
is
going to?
right here. So, at your last meeting, the conversation came up about a desire for council for boards and commissions to seek council approval to create subcommittees and task forces, and we made a distinction there because we wanted they're used interchangeably, with the thinking that a task force is something that's time limited, and has a specific purpose, where a subcommittee is a standing permanent group. And so that's the distinction we wanted to make. And then again, they would come to approval by way of their work plan to you all. And so in the conversations earlier, we heard a desire for council to approve the individuals of the subcommittees. I believe I captured that correctly. And we just wanted to point out that currently your Arts Commission appoints the members of your Public Arts Design Board.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I guess I'll say, is that we wanted to point out an addition of participation on a subcommittee or a task force being exclusive to appointed members only. You all currently have a couple of boards and commissions where they have the ability to pull in volunteers or subject matter experts who are not appointed members to help with grant reviews or different means. And so there was conversation amongst the committee and other sources that there's a desire for that to not be the case, and that type of membership be exclusive to appointed members. And then I can go to the next slide or stop here.
Do y'all have thoughts on that?
Well, I was just going to say, because I lived through the Art Commission stuff, when they do grants, the reason why they pull people in is because they need the help. There's so many reviews. Now, I'm okay with them sending us, the council, the list for the council to approve that list of that. That's something we currently don't do. So council's aware who's reviewing the boards, but because like they're specifically looking for people with certain skills for their committees to review the grants. Someone that has an understanding of, budgets, or someone that has an understanding of the arts. And when we say the arts, from music to singing to serving the community. So I think I haven't heard of any issues over the years. I don't know, but I think the council should at least
How much money are
approve
they handing
it.
out?
It's in the budget. Whatever the Arts Commission thing we approve
Is
in
it
the
like
budget,
over $1 million or what?
it's close to it. I think it's like $2 million.
I can pull it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just seems, to me, I would want to tighten that up a little bit. I saw the list, and I didn't know quite what was getting what. Do you have thoughts on that? Like, just cede that to whoever, or do you think there should be a little better oversight?
Probably a little bit more oversight. And the only reason I say that is, we have gotten complaints in the past before about how it was distributed and, some of that, so.
But I think that your, Councilor Branch, your thought of us approving who
The
needs
list,
to be on
who's
it.
on it, yeah.
I think that's a compromise to that. I don't necessarily think that I want to be involved in placing those committee members because I don't know that the skills that you would need for an HRC grant or an art grant. But receiving the list, I think, would provide better transparency.
Well, let me ask this: Is the
Is
the arts board large enough? Like, wouldn't these be standing? I don't know how many people are on it, but let's say the Arts Commission. What's the name of it?
It's
Arts
like
Commission.
12 people.
Okay, what if it was a larger board and then you have members of this Public Art and Design Board so that you have enough people to actually do this work that are
Public art's
appointed by...
different from grants.
Okay, so this is...
Yeah, the public arts is different from the grants part.
Okay.
And
so the
why-
grants were coming under the Arts Commission.
Correct.
Okay.
The grants are under the Arts Commission.
But why does the Arts Commission appoint the Public Art Design
Yeah.
Board?
I don't know.
That,
It's in the background.
Yeah.
I don't know.
that seems
That
odd,
predates
right?
me.
It's like they have
That's the only
appointment
one.
authority to a whole different
Yeah.
board that we don't have any. I think we need to think about that.
Yeah, that's fine for that piece, but yeah, from the grants is completely separate.
Yeah. Okay.
So is there a desire to essentially for the grants evaluators for the list of who is doing that to be provided to council?
I guess I would
to-
want to
to
understand why people on the board aren't doing them themselves. And is it because the board's so small? Like, if we had a better board size, would they have enough staff? Because it's a little, these are, from a fiduciary point, like, this is $1 million or this is $1 million, I know in human relations, $1.5 million. That's not small dollars. And you want to make sure that people allocating that don't have conflicts of interest or have integrity. I mean, I just think there should be some oversight of the city there.
Yeah, I think we probably need to get someone to present because they have something to address.
I mean,
Conflicts
because
of
we may
interest.
not have had problems, but I would just hate for somebody with some sort of,
I know they look for conflicts of interest.
Yeah,
From
okay.
So it is the Arts Commission and the Human Relations Commission. So I just wanted to point out it's not just them. The Grants Committee has non-appointed people on the Grants panel, not official committee members. Is the message that I'm getting from their liaison. So we can provide additional information, but to your point, yes, the Arts Commission is appointing the members of the Public Art Design Board. And so,
and the Public Art Design Board meets all year, right?
I can find out their exact meeting schedule, but I believe so.
Because the Grant Commission only meets from January to mid-February.
They have a separate meeting from the Arts
Yeah,
Commission.
they're separate.
So separate location, meeting
could
time.
we get more staff input on that one particular topic? Because I just don't understand enough. Sounds like, do you know what's going on there?
Well, and I was just going to ask, for the Human Relations Commission, they don't have, do they have a separate grants group as well?
They do.
The grants are
And how's
now,
that for-
right, it's like now in the housing department, but yes, they have a process for that where they use volunteers to assist.
Yeah, and I think that's the one that I know I've heard complaints about how that's distributed and some other stuff over the years. Folks have come back and felt like they were not treated fairly by the.
So the ask is for more information on both of these processes?
I
think it's fair, yeah.
Okay. All right. Some additional follow-up items that we've heard over our last couple of meetings that we believe we can do administratively. One, just as a reminder, the Community Engagement Department meets with the staff liaisons on a bi-monthly basis. We can clarify the orientation and onboarding expectations. So 2 years ago, we created an onboarding handbook for board and commission members. We can update that and clarify expectations, specifically that the department should be providing a deeper level of onboarding than what we provide at the high level. We can update the application to include the estimated hours per month that board members can expect for this when they apply, and then establishing some attendance thresholds and reporting requirements. So staff liaison should be including the attendance data in Granicus so that it's readily available at all times. So we'll reinforce that and then figure out some thresholds for what that looks like as far as missing meetings. Also, we will update. We've created a work plan template that you all see when they come before you annually, and we'll update that template to ensure alignment with the FY 26-29 strategic plan. And then lastly, on the administrative side, incorporating a way for board and commission leadership to meet. So we talked about the summer social, but how we add a professional development collaboration opportunity. So we're just trying to work through what that looks like. Some potential future council actions that we believe there's consensus on outside of today's conversation is that you'll probably want to recommend to the full council is approval of that council liaison guidance. We did fix number 9 from facilitate training to may consider supporting. And then once we get clarity on some of the things today, we'll update the universal bylaws template. Anything else? Yes,
Do
ma'am.
you have, on that last slide, the council guidance, the council liaison guidance on hand?
I do, but I believe,
Right here.
let me see if it was a backup item.
I've got it in there.
Okay. I thought we included it, but I would double check.
Yeah, it's on board docs.
Okay.
I will say the only, Counselor Silver just shared some remarks that I shared with you, and again, I'm agnostic to it, but he had suggested maybe guidance on work plans or more of a template on work plans to help people sort of, strategic plan and sort of where they're bucketed and make sure there's alignment. I don't, again, just making sure that y'all saw that and
Yes.
maybe if there's any other, does anybody
And thank you
here?
for that, Mayor Cow. I did see it, and we have a template that we can update to make it,
Okay.
to enhance that some.
Okay. Do we need to take formal actions or?
So I think this is, if you're satisfied with where you are, you've covered a lot of ground. We can, what I might suggest, I can sort of recap the items that I think there's consensus from the committee to recommend out to the full council, and maybe you can move to support, making a recommendation out to council on those items, which I'll summarize for you quickly. So in addition to the two items that you see there, from today's conversation, we would add to that report out list that the boards that you saw earlier, with some exceptions which I'll name, be combined into one big board. The exceptions being the EAB, Environmental Advisory Board, and SMAC, that those would remain separate. In terms of how that combination would work, the recommendation from the committee would be that you reach the ideal size to be determined through natural attrition. The committees and boards that were formerly standalone would become standing subcommittees of the new parent board. The subcommittee membership would be established by self-selection from the appointed members of the parent board. In terms of some other changes, you've suggested that what's currently known as the Transit Authority be retitled the Transit and Mobility Advisory Commission. The Transit and Mobility Advising Commission would which would be comprised of RTA, BPAC, and the Mayor's Council on Persons with Disabilities would be the boards that would be wrapped into that newly retitled board. And you've also made a recommendation that the Fair Housing Hearing Board be retitled to the Fair Housing Advisory Board to better reflect the nature of the work that they do. I think that captures all of the.
I think for me, for the definitely looking for some conversation before we just say make it the big board, because another thing that I'm thinking of is if we merge all these different ones that all meet on different days, the people that are part of those boards now have to, that we may lose people, and they have to determine if they're going to be available, because they've assigned, if I'm RHDC and I'm the second Wednesday at 8:30 in the morning, and then you put me under here, and now I'm Thursday afternoons at 2, now I'm like, wait a minute, that's not what I signed up for. So I'd love to just maybe noodle on that for a minute before we make a big decision. That affects a lot of people before we do that.
Yeah, so that leads to a question I was going to ask. What's the effective date that we want to see this happen? Because that impacts, that everything you said is part of that transition to an effective date. So when do we say we want?
I mean, I would ask staff in terms of.
What do you see as a transition?
I think probably to work out some of the issues that you just raised. We're right in the middle of the fiscal year. We could make this a year-end effective date. I think that give more than sufficient time for those conversations to happen.
January.
Right.
Yeah, to essentially make it a January 1 implementation for some of these changes, if that feels better. I do think that probably allows staff and members to make adjustments, whatever adjustments they might need to make it this
The
happens.
human relations would now be around 38, right? Because if we took the disabilities committee. So, I mean, still huge, but a little smaller in terms of conflicts and maybe finding some common ground.
So I'm going to ask this other question. So we don't have 200 people signing up a public comment. How do we want to address any concerns or things from the public and committee members that may be like, no, this doesn't work? Or how do we want to receive feedback on these suggestions?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Because I'm my head is spinning.
Yeah.
I'm like, I see public comment now, July 1. You know, a lot of people that may have some issues, I may not understand
Well-
the why.
Given that we have a January 1st target, I think you put this out there and we just have it as, could we have it as a matter for public hearing or just open
A
for
public hearing
comment?
or
Yeah.
we could have a work session in which you allow the public comments for it. We've done that on other topics before, where we did a special work session and let people come and speak there.
Okay.
I like that.
Okay.
And that could be something we plan for maybe August or
Yeah,
September.
but late August.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. That good?
Because I already see it. Look, Mark shaking it. I see people out there shaking their heads like, yeah, we coming.
And I think in between then, I know this may not be the space for everyone to say something right now, but please, I think almost everybody here has my number. Please talk to
Contact
me.
us.
Like don't think that you have to wait until August. I need to know these things so I can uplift them, but I'm not sure that right now is that moment. But please feel free to contact us, email, phone call.
And please pass on and share. We're going to set a meeting or time aside to have the conversation and receive that feedback.
Right. Now, that's going to be before we decide what to do? Like, that would be like, if it's going to be almost like a public hearing to vote on what the changes would be, is that what we're saying? Okay.
And then maybe we can vote on it. Since we're not going to implement it until January,
Yeah.
try to do that first meeting in September after
Okay.
public comment.
Does that make sense? Or?
Yeah.
I was just, so procedurally, so this report out would appear on the July 1
Yeah, we report
council
it out.
agenda. And with this intent to make these changes that I just sort of described effective January 1 of 26, but also giving, setting aside an opportunity to be determined the exact date for a special hearing or session to receive comment on
Right.
what's
Couldn't the
proposed.
recommended action be to take all of this and then put it to a hearing or a meeting? And that could be what we're voting on, to put it to a meeting in September or whatnot. And that's when we make that final decision. So I don't want people to think that on July 1st, we're making a decision and then after the fact, we're here now going, oh, now listen to me. Like, I want them to know that the decision's not made until after we hear from them, if that's going to be September. So on July 1st saying, let's make a motion to set that meeting for a conversation. Maybe. Does that make sense?
We could, yes, we
I think all this affects work plans and the rest of it, though, right? Because, and also appointments, like, at some point, you want to kind of freeze some of that for the next couple of months.
There certainly would be ripple effects to consider
Right.
depending on the direction that the full council wants to
Yeah.
go, that
Can-
you'd have to close the door.
Don't we get an updated list from the clerk's office in like July of changes for boards for the rest of the year?
One was just provided maybe about a month ago,
Okay.
if I remember correctly, but that is like a twice a year thing. And surely, if it helped the process here, we could provide it again,
Yeah, I think
updated, right? So, and what that is, what Councilmember Branch is referring to, for the record, is a forecast of upcoming vacancies on all the advisory boards for the next 6 months. So we could provide, an updated list again whenever the council would like to receive that.
And I would just assume that the pause on bringing bylaw updates, work plan updates would remain in effect until the final decisions are made, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think
All right.
Did a lot
Staff,
of
I think
work
we're-
today.
I think we're clear on the direction.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Well, if there's no further business, this is adjourned. Thank you.
All right.
Are we meeting again? This is the last meeting of us, right?
Yeah.